Title: How to Express Your Emotions in English. Simple and natural. Have you ever typed, "I'm fine," in English and felt worse right after? Not because the sentence is wrong, but because it's not true. This story is about a man who had good English but couldn't speak his feelings. And the moment he discovered that emotional English isn't about big vocabulary, it's about small, honest words. My name is Adam. I moved to Canada 3 years ago. At first, my English felt like a tool, useful, practical, simple. I could order food. I could talk to coworkers. I could smile and say good morning with confidence. People often said, "Your English is great," but they didn't see the hidden part. When emotions appeared, real emotions, my English disappeared. That evening, I came home after a long day at work. The sky was gray and low, like it was tired too. Rain tapped softly on the windows, steady and patient. I took off my shoes, placed my bag on the chair, and sat down without turning on the lights. The room was quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. Inside me, something felt heavy. Not the kind of sadness that makes you cry, not the kind of anger that makes you shout. More like a quiet pressure, like holding your breath without noticing. I told myself, it's okay, you're just tired. But I knew it wasn't only tiredness. I missed my old life. I missed speaking without thinking. I missed feeling understood. At work, I smiled all day. I joked a little. I answered questions. I completed tasks. From the outside, I looked fine. But inside, I was slowly becoming distant from myself. Then my phone buzzed. A message from my colleague Daniel. "You were very quiet today. Everything okay?" I stared at the screen. Everything okay? It was a simple question, but it touched a sensitive place inside me. I wanted to reply with something real. I wanted to say, I feel overwhelmed. I feel lonely. I feel lost sometimes. I'm trying, but it's hard. But my fingers didn't move. Because in my head, emotional English needed perfect words. It needed dramatic vocabulary. It needed correct grammar. It needed the exact sentence. And if I couldn't say it perfectly, I felt I shouldn't say it at all. So I typed the safest answer. Yes, fine. I pressed send, and immediately I felt smaller, like I had just pushed my own feelings into a dark box. I put my phone down and leaned back. The silence grew thicker. That's the strange thing about hiding emotions. You think it protects you, but it slowly separates you from people. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain. I replayed Daniel's message again and again. Everything okay? Why couldn't I just answer honestly? I knew English words. I knew how to talk about weather, schedules, reports, movies, but I didn't know how to talk about myself. And maybe the real truth was this. I was afraid of sounding weak, afraid of sounding childish, afraid of being misunderstood. So I stayed silent. Again. At around 2 a.m., I got up and drank water. I stood near the window and watched the streetlights shine on wet roads. The city looked calm. And suddenly, a thought came quietly into my mind. Maybe I'm not bad at English. Maybe I'm just not used to expressing emotions in English. That thought felt like a small candle. Not a big solution, but a beginning. The next day at work, Daniel passed my desk. He paused and looked at me. "Coffee break?" he asked. I hesitated, then nodded. At the cafe, we sat by the window. Steam rose slowly from our cups. Daniel didn't push me. He didn't ask big questions. He simply said, softly, "You know, when someone says, 'I'm fine,' it often means they're not." I looked down at my coffee. Daniel continued like he understood my silence. "When I first moved here, I couldn't talk about my feelings either." I looked up, surprised. "You?" I said. He smiled. "Yes, especially me." Then he leaned forward a little and said something I will never forget. Most people think emotional English needs big words, but real emotional English is actually very small. I felt my attention wake up fully. Because if he was right, then maybe I could do it. Maybe I didn't need perfect English. Maybe I just needed honest English. Daniel took another sip and said, "Do you want to learn the simplest way?" And before I could overthink, I nodded. "Yes," I said, because for the first time, I didn't want to hide behind "I'm fine." Segment 2. The Simple System. Daniel didn't pull out a textbook. He didn't say, "Let's study." He just looked at me the way a calm friend looks at you, like you don't need to perform. He placed his coffee cup down gently and said, "Okay, let's make this simple." Then he lowered his voice a little, as if what he was about to share was private. "Most emotional English," he said, "is built on one small sentence." He took a napkin and wrote 2 words, "I feel." He slid the napkin toward me. I stared at it like it was too easy. "That's it?" I asked. Daniel smiled. "That's the start. The start is the hardest part." I didn't know why, but my chest felt a little lighter already. Maybe because "I feel" didn't sound scary. It didn't sound dramatic. It sounded normal. Daniel continued, "Here's what people often do wrong. They try to explain everything. They tell the whole story first. But English speakers usually start with the emotion, small and clear." He wrote a simple pattern, "I feel" plus emotion word plus lately / these days / sometimes. Then he gave me examples, soft and natural. "I feel tired lately." "I feel overwhelmed these days." "I feel a bit down today." "I'm nervous about tomorrow." "I feel stressed sometimes." He looked up. "Notice something?" I read the sentences again. They didn't sound like a movie speech. They sounded like real life, like something you could say without feeling embarrassed. "They're short," I said. "Yes," Daniel replied. "Short is safe, short is honest, and short is easy to understand." I nodded slowly. I had always believed that if I talked about emotions, I needed big vocabulary, but these sentences were small, almost gentle. Then Daniel leaned back and said, "Now, your turn." My stomach tightened. He noticed. "No pressure," he said. "We can start very small." He picked the easiest emotion word he could. "Tired," he said, "because tired is not too personal. It's a safe emotion. Try, 'I feel tired lately.'" I took a breath. "I feel tired lately," I repeated. Daniel nodded. "Perfect." The word "perfect" surprised me. I hadn't used any advanced grammar. I hadn't used any impressive vocabulary, but he said it was perfect because it was clear and real. Daniel then added something important. "Now," he said, "let's make it more natural. In real conversation, people often add small softeners." "Softeners?" I asked. He wrote a few options. "A bit," "kind of," "a little," "not really," "just." These words, he said, make your sentence feel gentle. They reduce fear. They make your emotions sound human, not heavy. Then he showed examples. "I feel a bit overwhelmed lately." I feel kind of lost these days. I'm a little stressed. I'm not really okay today. I'm just feeling tired. When he read them out loud, the sentences sounded like warm water, not sharp, not extreme. And something inside me finally understood why my "I'm fine" had become a habit. Because "I'm fine" feels clean and closed. It ends the conversation. But "I feel a bit" opens a door gently. Daniel looked at me again. "So, Adam, how do you feel these days? Really?" For a second, my old fear tried to rise. I imagined myself saying the wrong thing. I imagined awkward silence. I imagined Daniel thinking I was weak. But the napkin was still in front of me. The pattern was there. The words were there. I didn't need a perfect sentence. I just needed an honest one. I swallowed. "I feel," I began. My voice was quiet. "I feel kind of lost these days." The moment I said it, I expected something bad. A joke, a change of subject, an awkward face. But Daniel did the opposite. He nodded slowly. "Thank you for saying that." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. Thank you for saying that. Not "stop being negative," not "you'll be fine," not "don't worry," just "thank you." Then Daniel added something that made me feel safe. "You don't have to explain everything," he said. "You can if you want, but the first step is naming it." Naming it. I repeated the phrase in my head. Maybe that was the secret. In my own language, I could name emotions easily, but in English, I avoided them like they were dangerous. Daniel pointed to the napkin again. "Let's build 2 more sentences. One about your day, one about your life." He offered options, like a friend handing you stepping stones across water. Maybe, "I feel overwhelmed at work sometimes," or "I feel lonely on weekends." Only choose what feels true. I looked down at my hands. My heart beat softly. Then I said, "I feel lonely on weekends sometimes." My voice shook a little. Daniel didn't interrupt. He didn't rush. He gave the sentence time to exist. Then he nodded again. That's a real sentence, and real sentences create real connection. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone when talking about loneliness. And I noticed something else. When I used simple English, my emotions didn't feel smaller. They felt clearer. Daniel picked up the napkin and folded it carefully. "Keep this," he said, handing it to me. "And tonight, try one more thing." I looked at him. "What?" He smiled. "Use emotional English in a normal place," he said. "Not a serious conversation, just a small moment. Let it be easy." I didn't fully understand, but I nodded, because something inside me was curious now, and I wanted to see what would happen if I stopped hiding behind "I'm fine."
Segment 3. Practicing emotions in real life. That evening, I walked home slowly. The napkin was folded carefully inside my pocket, like something fragile. Not because it was paper, but because of what it represented. A new way of speaking. A new way of being honest. Daniel's words repeated softly in my mind. Use emotional English in a normal place. Just a small moment. A normal place. I wondered what that meant. When I reached my apartment building, I stopped at the mailbox. The hallway smelled faintly of cleaning soap and old paper. Mrs. Taylor, my neighbor, was there, checking her mail. She was in her 60s, always polite, always calm. She smiled when she saw me. "Good evening, Adam," she said. "How are you today?" This was it. A normal place, a normal question. My old answer was ready, like muscle memory. "I'm fine." But tonight, I paused, just for 1 second. I remembered Daniel's voice, short as safe, soft as honest. I took a small breath. "I'm okay," I said, then added, "just a bit tired today." The sentence surprised even me. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't heavy, but it was real. Mrs. Taylor nodded warmly. "Oh, I understand that," she said. "Long days can be exhausting." That was it. No awkward silence, no strange looks, just understanding. As I walked upstairs, something inside me shifted. I realized something important. When you express emotions simply, people don't panic. They relate. Later that night, I stopped by a small grocery store near my building. The lights were soft. Music played quietly from the ceiling. At the counter, the cashier smiled. "How's your evening going?" she asked. Normally, I would say, "Good." But again, I paused. "It's been a long day, but it's okay." She smiled back. "I feel that," she said. "Hope you get some rest." Another small moment. Another real connection. I walked home carrying my bag, feeling strangely lighter. It wasn't because my problems were gone. They weren't. But I wasn't carrying them alone anymore. That night, I sat on my bed and called my sister. We hadn't talked properly in weeks. She answered quickly. "Hey," she said. "How are you?" I hesitated. This felt bigger than the grocery store, bigger than the hallway. Family emotions are heavier. But I remembered the pattern. I feel plus soft word. "I feel a little overwhelmed lately," I said. The line was quiet. There was a pause. Then my sister said something I didn't expect. "Thank you for telling me." My throat tightened. She continued, "You don't always have to be strong." We talked for a while. Not about solutions, not about fixing everything. Just sharing. And when we said goodbye, I noticed something. I felt closer to her, even though we were far apart. Before sleeping, I opened my notebook and wrote, "Today, I used emotional English 3 times. Nothing bad happened. Something good did." The next day at work, I started noticing things. People around me used emotional English all the time, but very quietly. "I'm a bit stressed today." "I'm not feeling great this morning." "I'm excited about this project." "I'm kind of nervous about the meeting." They weren't making speeches. They were just being human. And for the first time, I felt like I could join that world. Later that week, Daniel stopped by my desk. "So," he asked, "did you try it?" I nodded. "Yes," I said, "in small ways." He smiled. "That's the best way." I thought about how different I felt compared to just a few days ago. English no longer felt like a test. It felt like a bridge between what I feel and what I can say. But there was still one thing left, one place where emotional English felt the hardest, a place where fear still waited quietly. And I knew it was coming soon because my manager had scheduled a meeting with me, a private meeting, the kind that makes your stomach tighten before it even begins. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling again. But this time, my thoughts were different. Instead of panic, I felt preparation. I whispered softly to myself, "I feel nervous about tomorrow." The sentence didn't scare me. It steadied me. Because now I had words, and tomorrow I would need them.
Segment 4. The real test. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The room was quiet. The sky outside was pale and still, like it hadn't decided what kind of day it wanted to be. I sat on the edge of my bed and took a slow breath. In my head, one sentence repeated calmly. I feel nervous about today. I didn't fight the feeling. I named it. And somehow, that made it smaller. At work, everything looked normal. People walked past my desk. Keyboards clicked. Coffee machines hummed. But inside me, there was a steady tension. At 10:30 a.m., a message popped up on my screen. "Adam, can you come to my office?" My stomach tightened. This was the moment. I stood up, straightened my shirt, and walked down the hallway. My manager, Sarah, sat behind her desk. She looked up and smiled. "Thanks for coming," she said. "Please, sit." Her voice was calm. Not serious, not cold. That helped a little. She began, "I wanted to check in with you. You've been doing good work, but you've seemed quiet lately." There it was. The old version of me would have said, "I'm fine," and ended the conversation. But the napkin was still in my pocket, not physically, but in my mind. I remembered the pattern. I feel plus soft word plus context. I took a breath. "I enjoy the work," I said slowly, "but I feel a bit overwhelmed sometimes." My heart beat fast, but I didn't stop. "I'm still adjusting," I added, "and some days feel heavier than others." The room stayed quiet for a moment. I waited. Sarah nodded. "I'm really glad you told me." That sentence again. "Glad you told me." She leaned forward slightly. "I didn't know how you were feeling," she continued, "and I appreciate your honesty." Nothing bad happened. The world didn't end. My job didn't disappear. Instead, the conversation opened. We talked about workload, about expectations, about small changes that could help. But more importantly, we talked like humans. When the meeting ended, Sarah smiled. "And Adam," she said, "please don't feel like you have to carry everything alone." I walked out of the office feeling lighter. Not because all problems were solved, but because I had spoken truth in English. At lunch, Daniel saw me and raised his eyebrows. "Well?" he asked. I smiled. "I told her how I feel, simply." Daniel nodded like he already knew. That's emotional English. Clear, calm, honest. That afternoon, something else happened. A small thing, but meaningful. A coworker asked me to help with a project. Normally, I would say yes, even if I felt tired. But this time, I said, "I'd like to help, but I feel a bit stretched today. Can we do it tomorrow?" He didn't get upset. He said, "Sure, thanks for telling me." That sentence echoed again. "Thanks for telling me." I realized something then. People don't get upset when you express emotions clearly. They get confused when you hide them. On my way home, I walked slower than usual. The city felt different, not because it changed, but because I had. English was no longer something I used only to survive. It was something I could use to be myself. That evening, I sat by the window again. Rain returned softly, just like before. But this time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt calm. I opened my notebook and wrote, "Today, I used emotional English when it mattered most, and I was respected, not judged." I closed the notebook and leaned back. There was still one thing left, one final understanding I needed. Because learning how to express emotions in English wasn't just about talking to others. It was also about how I talked to myself. And that realization came quietly later that night. Segment 5. The Way It Changed Me. CTA. That night, I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't scroll on my phone. I just sat by the window with a cup of warm tea and listened to the rain. The street outside looked the same as it always did. Soft lights, wet roads, quiet cars passing. But inside me, something felt different. It wasn't happiness exactly. It was relief. For a long time, I thought expressing emotions in English was a language problem. But now I understood the truth. It was a fear problem. I wasn't afraid of English. I was afraid of being seen. When you learn a new language, you can hide behind simple phrases. Good, fine, okay. These words are safe. They protect you, but they also keep you alone. That evening, I opened my notebook again and wrote a sentence slowly, like I wanted it to sink into my bones. Simple English can carry deep emotions. Then I wrote another line. I don't need perfect words. I need honest words. I looked at the page for a long time, and suddenly a memory came back. Back home, years ago, I used to speak my feelings easily. Not perfectly, but openly. I would say,
I feel tired. I feel hurt. I feel excited. I feel scared. There was no shame in it. Somewhere between moving countries, building a new life, and trying to sound correct, I had lost that simple honesty. I had replaced it with silence. I whispered softly to myself in English, "I feel proud of myself today." At first, it felt strange, like wearing new shoes, but then it felt warm. Pride is an emotion too, and I deserved to say it. Then my phone buzzed, a message from Daniel. "How are you feeling now?" I smiled. This time, my fingers didn't reach for "fine." I typed, "I feel lighter. Thank you for helping me." A few seconds later, he replied, "You did the hard part. You chose honesty." I read that sentence again. You chose honesty. And I realized something important. Expressing emotions is not only about language, it's about courage. But it doesn't have to be loud courage. It can be quiet courage. The kind of courage that says, "I'm not feeling great today. I feel overwhelmed lately. I feel lonely sometimes. I feel grateful. I feel excited. I'm nervous, but I'll try." Small sentences, big doors. I finished my tea and stood up. Before going to bed, I practiced a few calm, natural emotion phrases out loud, just like a gentle routine. Here are the ones that helped me most. I feel a bit tired today. I feel kind of stressed lately. I'm not really okay, but I'm trying. I feel proud of myself. I feel grateful for small things. Then I added one more, my favorite. I feel more like myself, because that was the real change. English stopped being a wall. It became a bridge. The next morning, I woke up and noticed something simple. The same city, the same job, the same life, but I felt more present inside it. I didn't feel like a silent visitor anymore. I felt like a person who could belong. And if you're listening to this story right now, I want you to know something. If you struggle to express emotions in English, you are not alone. It's normal, but you can improve gently. Start with one sentence today, not for someone else, for you. Say it quietly, "I feel." Then choose one honest word. That's all. And here's a small challenge for you. After this video ends, pause for a moment and say one real sentence in English about how you feel today, even if it's simple, even if it's small, because your feelings deserve words, and your English is already enough to begin. If this story helped you feel calmer and more confident, subscribe to Peaceful English Stories for more gentle stories that teach English naturally, one calm step at a time. And if you want, leave a comment with one sentence. Today I feel. I read them, and it helps this peaceful community grow. One sentence can change more than you think, just like it changed me.